not a good sign. Hi everyone, my name's Jane and I'm an alcoholic. I cannot even begin to put into words how honored and how humbled I am to have been asked to share my story tonight. It just blows me away. How does this happen? How does my story get out to somebody and they hear it, and they think enough of it to invite me to share in front of this group of amazing women. And have we not shared magic this weekend? Oh my gosh! It's incredible, and this always happens when women in recovery, women in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous get together. I feel like every smile has given me a little bit of peace. I feel like Tony gave me a lot of peace. I wish people could experience Tony before something as nerve-wracking as this all the time. But also just the grace that I've felt ever since I stepped into this hotel this weekend. There's something special going on, and I am just so honored to be here. But anyway, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. My sobriety date is September 24th, 1996. And that is only, thank you, and that is all as a result of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, amazing sponsorship through the years, amazing sponsees that have helped me more than I've assisted them. My family who stuck by me through thick and thin, and my faith in my mysterious, wonderful God that's seen me through so much, and all the angels that have greeted me at every twist and turn in this journey. It seems like at every turn there was an angel waiting there to lift me up, especially through the dark times, but even through the great times, I am so grateful for this precious, life-saving, life-sustaining, life-giving gift called sobriety. And when I look out, too, at everyone now, I have like a crazy glare in my eye, but that's okay. I know that this room is filled with a bunch of people who should probably be dead. And I'm talking about the Al-Anons, too, how does this happen? Again, it's just mind-blowing. I don't want to forget to thank everybody who has made this come together. First of all, Sandy, thank you for leading this ship. Corey for also being her right-hand person. I also want to thank, oh my gosh, Megan, the hostess with the mostest, really. She's not kidding when she says that we felt this like instant connection. I also have fallen in love with Lucy, the speaker chair, and she's just such an inspiration, and I was graced to have a really meaningful lunch with her today. So I'm so thankful that I got to meet you in person after all the correspondence over the phone. And also, I have like some, too, how there's all these like God coincidence things that happen at these. Well, anyway, I actually shared like 10 years ago in Detroit, and my hostess from that is here. And she's we're soul sisters. We had that connection, just like Megan. The minute you like step into the car, it's like, boom! We were meant to be in each other's lives. This is cool. And she was so cool and treated me to a spa day today to chill me out so that I could relax. So between her and Tony, I'm good. I'm good. But also, all the amazing speakers who've given up their weekends to come here and join us. First of all, Diane, I got here midway through your talk. You were amazing. I am so graced to have been able to listen to your words, and as always, I learned something and take something from it, and I know that I have to do something, and I'll share that. And Candace last night, oh my gosh, and let's give Candace another round too. Thank you, Candace. I'm so happy to meet you. And it's a big secret who Tomorrow Morning is, but you're gonna love her, I promise. She's amazing too. And with that, I want to also thank the tapers, because I feel like that's a vocation. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm one of those alcoholics that lost my license for life. And I don't know what I would have done without the speaker tapes in times of trouble. You know, so thank you for what you do. And what better gift to give than somebody's story, right? So yeah, go back and see them, and they'll probably recommend some great tapes for you. Yeah, so everyone who I just mentioned, you're all examples of grace. And once again, the committee, you know, you've outdone yourselves. And I want to make you all a promise tonight. I've been so nervous, but I actually feel okay right now. And I recall the words of my sponsor, Diz, who passed away a few years ago, but he used to always say to me, Jane, it's a good thing when you get nervous, because it means you're humble enough to let God in. And I really have been thinking about that, meditating on that today, and I really feel okay, amazingly okay, given these circumstances. But anyway, I also believe strongly that the will of God will never take me where the grace of God won't protect me. So this program of alcohol, oh, I forgot to tell you my home group. Oh my gosh. It is in Tallahassee, Florida. I hear there's some Tallahassee women here too. Yeah! So my home group is 909 Central Group, Tallahassee, the noon meeting on Sundays. And yeah, look me up if you ever get there. But I remember after a really dark period in my life, I walked into that meeting, and an old timer there, his name was Coach Bob, he said to me, young lady, you'll never have to be alone again. And he was so right. I've been going to that meeting for 18 years now, and I've never felt alone. What an awesome promise that was. So, I am so grateful for this program, for this non-religious path of spiritual help with mutual assistance. We all help each other out. And I feel like there's so many beautiful counterintuitive wisdoms in this program. You know, like in the prayer of St. Francis, you have to suffer in order to get well. You have to die in order to live. And you have to give it away in order to keep it. So I feel like I'm commissioned tonight to do just that, to share with you my story. But that being said, any one of you could be up here behind the podium sharing your stories. Your pain is not greater than my pain. We all have that one principle of surrendering in common. So it's my privilege to share with you my story tonight. And it's really kind of my involvement in Alcoholics Anonymous has been a very simple program. I go to meetings, I'm sponsored, and I work the 12 steps. And I don't even really like saying work. It's an honor to do the 12-step program. And I know I live with great assurance and great confidence, because I know that if I ever stumble on my path, that the answer is only 12 steps away. There's something really cool about that, and something very comforting and reassuring. Bill Wilson deemed it necessary that in order for us to, that it's foundational to recovery, I should say, that we all undergo this vital spiritual experience. And I think that comes directly as a result of doing the 12 steps. That's where we find the joy of living, right? So anyway, I want to make a promise to you tonight, as I said, that I'm going to speak with the language of my heart. That's what I prayed that God would allow me to do. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you my story right now. Okay, what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like today is basically the outline, as you know. And what I was like is, you can probably tell from my accent that I am from the great state of New Jersey. Yeah. And I grew up in Caldwell, New Jersey, which is about a half an hour west of the George Washington Bridge. So New York City was just a half an hour away. And I love being from New Jersey, you know. People in Florida say that I still have an accent. I don't think I do, but anyway, my family's still all in Jersey. I go to Jersey several times a year, and I really love New Jersey. But I grew up in a big Irish Catholic family. Surprise, surprise, right? And I really had a great childhood. That's another thing that I love about stories, is you hear everything on the spectrum. You know, you hear people who have had, you know, tragic childhoods, people who have, you know, childhoods where, you know, everything was okay, maybe something bad happened, or maybe there was something going on, and then you have people who had, you know, picture-perfect childhoods, and sometimes I feel like I have survivor's guilt because that was me. I grew up in a family that was amazing. My mom and dad are about to celebrate their 60th wedding anniversary, and they have the happiest marriage I've ever seen. You know, there are 5 kids in my family, and we all grew up going to Mass every Sunday. You know, we took up a whole pew. There were 5 of us, plus mom and dad. And, you know, it was just nothing new, right? Like, love God, love your neighbor, treat people the way that you want to be treated. And mom and dad made a conscious effort to wake up every morning and be happy. You know, I was so lucky. And we went to Catholic schools. I went to a Catholic elementary school. But just to talk a little bit about my parents too. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was a college track and field coach who actually led his college team to an NCAA championship in the 70s, which is a pretty big deal. And back in the day, and I have to boast a little bit about him, but my dad was favored to be the first ever to break the 4-minute mile. And he ran for Villanova, and he actually did 4.00.02. Just missed it. But does that tell you about his work ethic and his discipline? And he instilled that into all of his kids. Later on down the line, I'll tell you just how disciplined I was when it came to, you know, my using. And but anyway, again, just a happy childhood. And let's move quickly into high school. I went to an all-girls Catholic high school. I graduated in '81. There were 81 of us in my high school class. I always like to give a shout out to Whitney Houston, because she was one of my friends in my class, and I always feel like I want to honor her from back here, because I feel so lucky that I was privileged to be her friend before the madness kicked in, you know? But she knew me when I was young and innocent, and I knew her when she was young and innocent, you know? And it's kind of cool. And God knows she's no longer here with us because of this crazy disease that we all struggled with and are recovering from. And I wish she could have been experiencing the lives that we do. So anyway, the first time I drank, I was 14. And it was actually my older cousin, who was about 18, and took me to the movies, and it was the original Star Wars. And I often crack up at how crazy it is with the symbolism there, you know. So she had bottles of rum, and she kept dumping them into our Cokes, and I remember sitting in my seat, and back then that was like cutting edge, you know. And I remember sitting in my seat just like, woo! Oh my gosh, I have never felt like this before. This is amazing. I was flying like right there, intergalactically, right next to like Han Solo on that Falcon Millennium, you know, breezing through. And again, it's so weird because it's like, it took me into a whole other galaxy, onto a whole other plane. And I loved it. Until I got really, really sick after the movie and threw up in the car, and I was like, I am never doing that again. And so that's another difference from so many alcoholics say, you know, the first time they used, they felt like they really fit in their own skin for the first time. With me, it was always like it made plain Jane become outrageous Jane. It bumped everything up a bunch of notches for me. And that's the story of my early using. It was like I wanted to be, you know, walk into a room and people be like, Jane's here! Yeah, the craziness is about to begin. And again, that didn't even start until I went to college. So anyway, backing up into high school, I was the all-American kid, really. I mean, I remember I smoked weed once, and I hated it. And I remember, you know, drinking that one time and then drinking another time. But I was actually on the student council. I was on the track team. I was on the ski club. I mean, I was just, you know, like the all-American kid. And then I struggled with low self-esteem. That's probably, you know, but I think we're all hardwired for that. But then I went to college in New York City. I went to Manhattan College, and it was like letting the prissy little Catholic schoolgirl go wild, let loose and go wild in the biggest, baddest city on earth, you know? And I don't know if you remember New York City in the 80s, but everything that you see is true. And I lived it, and I tore that city up. And I went to school with you know, it was actually a Catholic college. Manhattan College is a Catholic college. So most of my friends went to Catholic schools like I did. And, you know, they were usually Irish, Italian background. And I saw all of them drinking like crazy all the time. And I was like, oh, well, this is just what you do when you're in college, right? You know, you go crazy, you let loose, you sow your wild oats. And that's how it all started out for me. And in the summer times is when I worked at a country club. And I worked in basically in the men's grill room. And I actually, this is another small world story, but my friend who I ripped and ran with and was wild with, who I haven't seen in 30 years, is here tonight. Stand up, Subi. Yeah! We were crazy together. Subi's from Anthem, Arizona, and through the grapevine, she heard that I got sober. I heard that she got sober. I can't believe we're both not dead. But Subi has like this. Subi helped break me bad because she was like 5 years older than me, and I thought she was the coolest thing. And she introduced me to stimulants so that I could drink, because she was a waitress too in the men's grill room, and we had to be at work at 7 a.m. That's when we started drinking. And we drank until 10 o'clock at night. And so she showed me how to do that. But anyway, I love her, and I'm so glad to see her. But that was also a crucial part of my getting broken bad, you know. I loved also being a rebel. The way I wasn't supposed to be acting the way that I was raised. And this is when I started just really not getting along well with my mom. And a big part of my spirit was rebellion, that defiance and that rebellion. And I looked cute. I looked like I could be this protected little princess where all the harsh realities of life would never affect me. And I could talk my way out of anything. I can't tell you how many DUIs I talked my way out of. But I always got away with it. And I know how that goes with privilege and all that kind of stuff. But I did. And because of the way I looked, but I loved being rebellious about that. Like I loved hanging out at biker bars. I loved hanging out in the hood. I loved hanging out with people who really, I had, you know, socioeconomically, I wanted to love everybody no matter what. I wanted to be non-judgmental, and so anyway, that was all like a part of my my coming into being in my late teens. So then, and I always like to say this too, My sophomore year of college is when I really started to lose control. I started out like biology, pre-med. I figured, let me go that route. And I graduated second in my class in high school, by the way. Well, by sophomore year, I went from being pre-med bio to being a creative writing major, minoring in French. And I really just, partying became everything to me. I loved to party. That was what it was all about. I loved New York. Like I said, I was on 242nd Street and Broadway, the last stop, and I had access to that city, and we went out. I don't know, at the beginning it was like I was addicted to the social life too. Like I didn't want to miss anything. So we went out every night, and it was like life in the fast lane, like the Eagles said. It was everything all the time. Life in the fast lane, and that's what we all lived. And yeah, and also the other song that I just came to mind is like, looking for love in all the wrong places. And that's when I started to need to feed that hole in me, that hole that we all have inside of us. And I started filling that hole, all right, but not with things that should have, helped me grow. And I realized early on that I always chose drinking men, And this is pushing it a little further, but I just want to say that these behaviors started early on. It was almost like I felt like my self-esteem was so low that I felt like I had this weird control. I would pick out like a guy that happened to be good looking, and like I would try to see if I could reel him in. And it did, once I reeled him in, whatever happened next was inconsequential. It was just that power of getting him because my self-esteem was so low. And then put drinking on top of that, and it was like I would become incapable of acting in a way that would let me be a woman of dignity and integrity, and I started to have basically semi-consensual sex, and and then I would wake up in that that haze, and the only thing that would dilute that would be drinking, and then that's how it became this cycle. And like I started doing things that I never thought I would do. Every line that I said I would never cross, all of a sudden I started to cross them all. And I knew that wasn't me, but I did some terrible things. But let's face it, if you're an alcoholic and you're a woman, chances are you were a slut, okay? And so I did some things that were definitely not cool, but the ones like things like dating a married man, stuff like that. Like that wasn't me. But anyway, let me just go back to college, because that stuff just started. There were hints of that in college, but it didn't get bad until later. So college, junior year, I was tired, man. Manhattan was wearing me out. And I was blessed with a good brain, and I had this, I could handle, I went crazy at midterms, went crazy at finals, but I just was tired, man. And I was living, sex and drugs and rock and roll. Actually, I should say sex light at this point, but it was all about, music and rock and roll and living that lifestyle. And let's face it, it's kind of hard figuring out how to be a woman and what kind of a woman you want to be, even back in the 80s, Like I was raised a certain way where I was supposed to, the happiness to me was supposed to be getting married and having kids and getting a house, right? I didn't feel like I wanted that. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to travel. I wanted to, so I felt like even that I was rebelling in, But anyway, so I decided to make my first geographic change. And what that entailed was going over to France. I was minoring in French, so I applied to a college over there, and I got sent over, and I spent a semester in France. And let me tell you, I thought, this was the first geographic change for me. I thought, just like we do so many times, I'm going to get over there, I'm not going to drink, I'm going to get serious about my studies, I'm not going to be fooling around with guys, I'm going to, I got to get serious about things. Well, that didn't go so well. I moved to a little city called Nantes, and I was able to really speak French there because there, not many people spoke English. But I lived with a French nanny in a family. She lived in the family with me. She was 19-year-old, I was 19, and we tore up that city of Nantes like I did in New York. And it was the same thing, actually worse. We all know how that goes. It's progressive. And I don't know how I passed. It was pass-fail. So I just passed. But then I think back, and I had some great opportunities when I was over there. But I have some really funny stories, but I'll jump to, I had the opportunity to backpack through Europe when I was there. And I remember I had $300, and I had a train ticket. And the first stop, of course, for my magical mystery tour for a month and a half through Europe was Amsterdam. And then the second stop was London, where I spent, the first $150 was in Amsterdam, the second $150 was in London, get my hair done. It was 1984. And it was like I was still figuring out, like I said before, who I was. So I was really rock and roll, then I went hippie, then I went punk, then I went new wave. This was my new wave stage. I had my hair shaved up one side, white shoots coming out, wearing, vintage clothing, that whole deal. Every once in a while, I kind of wish I could suggest to the committee to put pictures of us during these phases of our lives up on the screens instead of what's up there. And I could tell you, for 14 years, I was drunk in every picture that anyone ever took of me. So anyway, I ended up having a great time. And what I learned that summer of traveling through Europe was that everywhere I went, I magnetized party people. How does that happen? How do they know? Well, maybe the way I looked, I don't know. But it's true, isn't it? It just happens. And I feel like we had a great time. It's so funny because every once in a while people in AA will be like, Jane, you thought you were having a good time. It's like, no, I was having a good time. I was still having a good time. So I went back to New York. Long story short, senior year came around. Now I'm really going to get it together. And of course, I then started to date like the biggest Coke dealer on campus my senior year. Now, let me tell you something. I, too, am a big believer in singleness of purpose. But I would be lying if I did not say that, weed and cocaine played a big part of my story, too. But they were enhancers, and they helped me to drink longer and harder and faster, as I said before. And alcohol, by far, was the love of my life. Nothing ever happened if I wasn't drinking. So I just wanted to clarify that. Hey, let's face it, we all do crazy stuff when we start drinking, right? We know what they are. Like I said, random sex acts, theft, criminal activities, drinking and driving. You know what I'm talking about. Well, sometimes people turn to do drugs too. So anyway, I just wanted to say that's how I feel about that. And you don't have to feel that way either. But I feel like it's a big part of my story. And anyway, so I came back to New York, as I said. Things just, continued to spiral out of control. I graduated, got a job teaching high school, and I taught high school French, English Lit, creative writing, and and I'll tell you something. And I moved to a city called Hoboken, New Jersey, which was right across from New York City, and it was where all the young people lived. So, and that's when I was living there. I think also in the Guinness Book of World Records, there's more bars per capita or whatever in Hoboken than anywhere else in the world. Perfect place for me to live. And anyway, I ended up living there and teaching there, and again, things just kept getting really bad. So, enough of this part of the drunkalogue, and I'll tell you, I got my first DUI. And again, this was when I was, dating a married guy. There was just a bunch of stuff going on. I got my first DUI, and I just had to get out of that whole situation. So a friend of mine had been teaching over in Japan. I thought this was another great geographic change, because I hear they don't have any drugs in Japan, or if you get them, you get in big trouble and get put in prison for a long time, and I wasn't having that. So anyway, I heard that this guy was interviewing in the big cities, so I went on the interview. It was this, good-looking English guy that interviewed me in a hotel room, and I said to him, "Hey, have you had the chance to see any of New York yet?" And he said, "No, I've been holed up having interviews for the whole weekend." I was like, "Well, how about tonight we go out?" So we went out, got wasted, I got the job, and 2 weeks later I was on a plane to Japan. And, what the heck? So, and I thought, by this time I have to mention I had a falling out with my family. They stopped inviting me to things like family weddings and stuff, because I would always just embarrass them. And I was almost like, I would get really ticked that they didn't accept me anymore because they didn't understand my lifestyle or whatever, that I would start doing that drinking at them, and things got even worse about that. If I knew there was a family wedding and I wasn't invited, I'd be like, "Watch this!" And I'd go out and do something really filled with nothing but self-harm. And that started to become it. So with the Japan thing, I was like, "Oh, now they'll really miss me now. I'm going to Japan." And meanwhile, they're like, "Thank God, she's gone, some peace." So I went to Japan and I remember when I was on the plane too, I remember the guy and I was wasted when I got on that plane. I had been up all night. I had some stuff on the plane. I drank it was a 14-hour flight, probably 14 bottles of the little vodka things. I was wasted. And I remember the guy next to me was like, "Do you speak any Japanese?" And I was like, I know how to say, "Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto." That's about it. Sake to me. I knew those. But anyway, Mr. Good-looking English guy picked me up on his motorcycle. I almost had him crash that thing because I was on the back of it. And meanwhile, he was probably like, "What the?" when I showed up like that. But anyway, I ended up teaching for, it was called Time Life Educational Services. And they contracted teachers out to large companies. So basically, I had this dream job, and I got paid a lot of money. And I had to live in a training center, because it was the Japanese men, very few women back then, men who were being shipped overseas for long periods of time, so it was an intensive program. So I had to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner with them, and because you guys have heard stories of the regimented Japanese lifestyle, for them, this was like, oh, intensive English, and then I would 25-year-old me would bebop into the room like, "Hey, you guys want to learn some English? I'll teach you the slang too, all the curse words, whatever." We just had a great time. All the cultural exchanges went down. We went out drinking every night. And that's when the real cultural exchanges actually started to really go down. But it was crazy. And living as an alcoholic over there was so easy. I don't know if anyone's been there, but I hooked up with a bunch of crazy Australians and Brits and Canadian. It was like this wonderland for foreigners to just get away with anything, because the Japanese were so polite. We would just be crazy, flashing people, whatever, and they'd be like, "Oh," They used to call us Henna Gaijin, which means crazy foreigners. But we just had, again, thinking it was the time of our lives. And I went for a year, and I ended up staying for 3 because it was so easy to drink every day. Now that is when I finally started to realize that I had a problem, because that's when I started waking up with the shakes. And that's when I started waking up and having to have drinks in the morning to just chill. That's when I started to realize that my life was a mess. My morals were shot. And I actually have a friend in England who I visited not too long ago, and she had this page to give me out of her diary, and it said, "My friend Jane decided to cut back on her drinking, which means she didn't drink for lunch on Thursday. I don't believe there's a good-looking bloke in Nagoya that Jane hasn't shagged." And I was just like, oh my God, you know? So that's how crazy things started to be. And like I said, that's when I decided, all right, it's time for me. By this time, I'm almost 30. So it's time for me to go back to the States and start looking for a husband and settle down, right? So I come back, I started working in Manhattan. I was disillusioned with jobs that I was offered, and anyway, my life just continued to get worse. I moved to Bayonne this time, which is right next to Hoboken, and anyway, I just started dating men that were just horrible, you know, like I don't know. Anyway, they just like to party. That's the bottom line. And so I got my DUI then. This is when I got my first DUI. And this is when my mother disowned me. And, you know, things were just bad. So, and there were like 18 snowstorms in Jersey that winter. Got my first DUI. I was standing outside getting pelted in the face with ice. And I said, that's it. I'm moving. I think I'm going to Florida. And a friend of mine owned a restaurant down in the Florida Keys. So I figured I'm going to go start my life fresh down in the Florida Keys. No drinking, no drugs, Florida Keys. Now, if any of you know the Florida Keys, so really that's what I did. I went down there and I got into all sorts of trouble down there. And I'm going to make this part short. That's where really I became homeless. That's where that incomprehensible demoralization occurred. That's where I was drinking. I used to love drinking like Stolichnaya or something like that. That's when I started drinking Popov out of the bottle. That's when the stuff that I used to snort, I started to smoke. And that's when I went from being 120 pounds into like an 85-pound skeleton. That's when the joy in my life was gone, and I had that proverbial looking in the mirror one day and not even recognizing the person in the mirror, and I had a little bit of light sink in, and I called a cousin of mine in Fort Lauderdale. And I think back, she had kids and stuff, young kids, and she let me go and try and clean up my act with her and live with them and get me out of the Keys. That was the darkest, deepest hell. As I said, I did things there that I never thought I would do. You know what I'm talking about, I think, you know. So anyway, I still did not even want to think about Alcoholics Anonymous, think about quitting drinking. I just figured I would temper it. And somehow, I became like a weekend warrior. I don't know how that transition happened. I remember getting sick in the beginning, but I just thought that was because I was malnourished and I wasn't feeling good and all that. So anyway, I'm going to make this really short. Met a guy, and I was living in Fort Lauderdale, and I was working for a travel agency. They put together travel tour companies, and traveling's always been my thing. So this guy lived actually in Austria at the time, and he would come in once a month, so we had a long-distance relationship. And one weekend, guess where he decided he wanted to go? Down to the Florida Keys to check out the water sports. And he was a guy that was into like ex-adventure tours over in Europe, like mountain climbing, rappelling, biking across France, that kind of thing. He was like really cool. He was fun, well-educated, really cute, and adventuresome. So we decided, and as soon as we got to the Keys, boom, first tiki bar, we went in and had a bunch of drinks, and we did that progressively as we went down, you know, to the Keys, and we ended up in Marathon. Now, they had just filmed a movie called True Lies with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and for that movie, they blew that bridge up. And so we were drinking all day. I remember we took a nap, and then later on, it was like, we went down to see the sunset because they're so beautiful in the Keys. And we decided to, and a friend of mine's band was playing in a bar that night. So we went to the bar, had a bunch of drinks, and decided to go back and watch the sun come up. So this time we went down this road and it said authorized vehicles only. And I'm like, vehicle, let's go, you know? And we went down this bridge road, and it was the weirdest thing. It was like this road to nowhere. And what happened was I didn't realize that it was the old bridge that they blew up at the time. So we're proceeding down the bridge, and the next thing I know, there is this thunderclap and this bolt of lightning that went through my very being. And I was like, oh my God, I saw this wall coming. And it was that cement barricade that they put up, and on the other side was the water. And I went slamming right into that thing, man, going like 40 miles an hour. And I just remember putting my hand down because my ankle was just like on fire, and I picked my hand up and there was just blood dripping, and I had felt my bones. And I was like, oh my God, where did this thing come from? Oh my God, how are we gonna get out of this? Oh my God, I'm in so much pain. Where did that thing come from? Oh, please, somebody help us. And I looked over at Max, and it just looked like he had hit his head. And I was squeezing his hand, and I was shaking. I was like, Max, wake up, wake up. You gotta wake up, you gotta help me here. How are we gonna get out of this? And he was just still. I hate this part, I'm sorry. And it never gets any easier to talk about this, but it didn't take too long before I realized that he was dead. And I remember thinking, oh my God, God, please take me too. There's no way I'm going to be able to live with myself. How can I live with myself when I'm like this drunk driver who, because of me, this precious life is no longer with us? And then I just remember praying. I remember saying, you know, my act of contrition, my prayers, trying to get right with God, because my lung was punctured and I couldn't move my body. And I remember praying for those lights, and finally they showed up, and I swear I was on my last breaths. Every breath that I took was like this. And I was just tired and wanted to just give up and die. And then I saw the blue lights. And I remember the police officer was so nice to me. He was like, hang in there, we're gonna get you out of here. Everything's gonna be okay, just hang in there, please. And I just was like, why is he being so nice to me? So they had to get the jaws of life. I got cut out of the car, and I got put on a helicopter and flown to Miami. And to make a long story short, I don't remember much of anything after that, but I can tell you I broke my neck at C1, C2, which is the same fracture that Christopher Reeve had. So when I tell you I'm a miracle, I'm not just saying that, really. A third of the people who sustain that fracture are killed instantly. A third are brain damaged, and a third are paralyzed, and I'm like, here. How does that happen? But that's what kind of got me through, was knowing that I was left for a reason. Okay, so the next thing that I remember was my dad at my bedside. And the first words that I said were, Dad, this didn't happen because I was drinking. And that look on his face was like, oh my God. Janie, what is it going to take, you know? And my mom was just so filled with anger and shame and disgust and really rage. I never saw my mom like that. I thought my mom would be nurturing and loving, and she was just done, man. So anyway, let me just step away. Okay. So the next thing I knew, again, was weeks went by. I was in traction. My eyes were crossed. I broke my neck, as I said. My knee hit the dash and jammed my whole my leg up my stomach, so my pelvis was completely shattered. My right ankle was severed, and they were able to sew it back on. But I'm sharing that because it was hell. But it's nothing compared to the emotional wreck that I was inside. So I remember people coming into my room, like volunteers and even like priests and, you know, whatever, and I was just like, please just go away. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to, you know. And I remember after months of being in traction, and I would get wheeled out to do something. And I remember I finally had another God moment where I would see like the elderly, working, or older adults, I should say, working on, knee replacement, hip replacement, kids that were going through cancer treatment. I was on the spinal cord injury unit. I mean, I wasn't paralyzed, but I was surrounded by people who were, and I started to just, seeing the smiles on their faces started to like get me out of myself. And I went to my first AA meeting in that hospital. As soon as I could slide from my bed into a wheelchair, that's what I did. And I can't say that I got a lot out of it then, but it was at least something where people could relate to me and I could be honest. So the long and short of it is, I then was looking at a lot of legal stuff. I had the previous DUI and then DUI manslaughter. I was let out on my own recognizance while I underwent physical therapy, and which was in St. Pete Beach, Florida. And I'll tell you, that group, I was allowed to go out for AA and physical therapy, and that AA group saved my life. It was a 7 a.m. morning meeting I went to every day, and those people loved me like a mother loving a child, and said things to me like, "There but for the grace of God go I." I can't tell you some of the messed up stuff I did while I was driving. We're with you, we'll be with you through this whole thing. And I was like, and they took me to my physical therapy, and I was like, are these people getting paid for this? This is unbelievable how they were with me and loved me, and that saying, they loved me until I could really love myself, which didn't come until much later. So anyway, I decided I was working an honest program, and I wish I could say that was the last time I drank, but it wasn't. I relapsed a couple times before my sentencing. I pled guilty because I knew I was going to prison, and it just didn't feel right saying not guilty because of me. Life was no longer here. I was guilty as hell. So I got sentenced to 5 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. And in Florida, you do 85% of your prison sentence, So anyway, this starts my whole prison experience. I'm sure you would love to hear about, an hour about that, but that's where I underwent my transformation. I am so grateful that I got 5 years in prison. I needed to get 5 years in prison. Thank you, because I didn't know who I was. I had to go on like this mining expedition to figure out who I was. And I'll tell you something, for anyone who does prison work, thank you, because those women that brought the meetings in were like my anchor. I so wanted what they had. And this is unbelievable, all these weird small world stories. Well, the day I got out of prison, I actually dropped my stuff off at my new apartment, went and got the gray taken out of my hair, and then went to, it was funny because I was in the back of a cab, and I share this because this was another weird thing, but unbelievably, Leonard Skinner's Freebird was playing on the radio. And I'm in the back seat crying, and the cab driver's like, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, "I just got out of prison." And he was like, "Whoa!" And he turned it up, and we started singing it together. And then I went to the meeting that I told you, where I was promised I would never be alone again. Well, guess who was at that meeting? The women who brought the meetings into prison. They were like, "Oh my God, when did you get out?" I was like, "Today!" They were like, "Oh my gosh, what the heck? What are the chances of that?" But anyway, thank you for those of you who bring the meetings into prison, because it was a life changer for me. Plus, I got to really honestly work on the 12 steps when I was in there. And I had a couple of experiences, and I want to share this too. My Catholic faith is very precious to me. It still is, it always will be. I still go to Mass on Sunday. I think it's perfect combination with that and AA. And I had some life-changing nuns and priests throughout my life. That's just a fact. And in prison, the priest who said Mass one day after Mass was like, "Ladies, I just want to let you know, I talked to the warden. I'm an alcoholic in recovery, and if anyone wants to do their 5th step with me, I'm here." And I was like, "Man, sign me up. Confession and 5th step. Let's kill 2 birds with 1 stone." And then also, another priest, I'll never forget, it was Easter Sunday, and I went to confession, and I started crying in confession, saying the same sin again, and this priest, when I looked up, he looked like Jesus too, like with the beard and whatever in the pictures. And I looked up at him, and his chin was shaking, and he was crying, and I was like, "Father, are you okay?" And he was like, "No, I'm not okay. I am so sick and tired of you coming into this confessional every time and stating the same sin over and over and over again. Who do you think you are? Above accepting God's forgiveness?" And I was like, whoa. And then he said, "You know, I keep telling you, God forgives your sins. Throw them out there into the sea of forgiveness, but you keep reeling them back in." He goes, "Do me a favor. Don't come back to Mass. Don't come back to confession until you forgive yourself. Or better yet, before you start to redeem yourself." And I was like, damn. But it really hit me, and you know what I mean? I needed like bricks in the head to really get to me, affect me like that. And then just being in prison, some of the finest women I ever met in my life I met when I was in prison. So many of them are in there because they struggle with alcohol and drugs, and like over 80% easy. And then the other 20%, they're in there because they were dealing with their dudes who got in trouble for drinking and drugging or whatever, So, but anyway, I really worked on myself in there. As I said before, the depths of our bottom are all, it's all inconsequential. The fact of the matter is that we all reach that point of surrender, and I glance at the past rather than stare at it, and I still, to this day, know that I can't drift into fear, worry, remorse, any of that stuff, because what it does is it takes away from my usefulness to helping somebody else, right? So I also feel that if I had to put the 12-step program into one word, it's honesty. I've learned to live an honest life. I keep it simple. I live honestly. I know the difference between right and wrong. So, I just live according to an honesty code, I dropped the mask early on, and I had to stop rationalizing. I had to stop making excuses. I had to really admit that my life was unmanageable at the very core, and I did this simply by, going to meetings and then noticing all these weird coincidences. That was very reassuring to me. I knew God was working in my life, and I knew that God understood the language of my heart. I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect, but aren't our imperfections perfect? We learn from them no matter what, right? Like every one of us has to transcend into that place of utter humility. So anyway, It's a slow and gradual progress, but the thing that I struggle most with still is resentment. I can be so resentful, you know. Another great sister, I don't know if any of you have ever seen Sister B, but she gave me this, like, I love her, but she gave me this beautiful prayer, and it's called the Prayer for Freedoms for Resentments. And I had a long talk with her about my resentments, and I couldn't believe she gave me this prayer. It's perfect. So I don't know if you want to close your eyes and say it with me now, but God, help me to look with soft eyes upon all who are part of my days. Break through the barriers of my scrutinizing views. Transform my inner landscape into a peaceful place of just accepting who everyone is as they are. Pull back my projections and my criticisms. Replace my mean measurements and my biased expectations with an openness that allows others just to be. Cleanse me of everything that clouds my perceptions and blocks the sunlight of your spirit. You know? It's never too late for us to be the persons that God meant for us to be. Today, I am so amazed and grateful for the life that I have. You know, I have had so many people. I remember, thankfully, all those who have helped me on my journey, you know. But I want to tell you a little bit about my life today. So when I got out of prison, I tried to get into school. I figured, oh, well, I got to do something. I can't teach anymore. I'm a felon. So I decided to go back to school. What better job than to help? What better job is there when you want to help people than social work, right? So I did what so many of us do. Yeah. I went back to Florida State. On my work release center, I randomly ended up in Tallahassee. I didn't know anyone there, but that's where my work release program was. Well, guess what else is there? Florida State University. So I applied to go back for my master's. The only job I could get was working at a hotel. I started as a housekeeper, and I thought it was the best job I ever got. And I was lucky to get that job. I remember looking at the woman who was hiring me. I looked her dead in the eyes and I said, please give me a chance. Where would any of us be without forgiveness? Where would any of us be without second chances? Please. And I'll tell you, I worked that job. I was a great housekeeper. I made it up to become working at the front desk, and I did that. I made $7 an hour, and again, it was the best job of my life. So I decided to go back to apply to the College of Social Work. Well, I didn't get accepted the first time. I didn't get accepted the second time because of my felony. But I'll tell you, and listen to me if you feel like you can surrender and give up on whatever your hopes and dreams are. Don't ever take no for an answer. I kept on them, and I finally got in the third time. And not only did I get in, but my letter ended up in the hands of the assistant dean, and she gave me a scholarship. An assistantship, so I got that, right? So I never let anyone down. I did great in grad school. I stayed in touch with everyone. My first job was working at a detox. Then I started working on crisis stabilization units. I started dating a string of guys that I knew they were just, you know, they were fun, and it was somebody to hang out with. Nobody ever seriously. And then I remember when it was probably 5 years into working there, I got a call from the dean who asked me if I was interested in being a full-time faculty member. I was like, what? What a miracle. They told me that I would never teach again, and then now I'm getting offered a job at Florida State University. You know, it's crazy. So now I just got my second promotion. I've been there for 10 years now, an associate teaching professor at Florida State University in the College of Social Work. It's a miracle. So many miracles have happened in my life. Oh my gosh. You know, I forgot to mention another miracle just yesterday. All these God things and angels and stuff, but I had to literally flag the bus down that was going on that beautiful tour to the Botanical Gardens and to the Heard Museum. And while we were out talking, you know how it goes, women just bond. One of the women there's daughter was in Parkland in Florida with the shootings. And we were all able to love her and surround her with, the same love that we all get when we're just shocked at devastating news. That's the kind of stuff that always happens to me. What are the chances of that happening? So anyway, moving right along, because I'm going to start to wrap it up, I also finally, and I know I'm fine by myself, but I met the most incredible guy at the 2009 Florida State Convention of Alcoholics Anonymous. He got invited to speak and share his story, and I got invited to speak and share mine. And it was wild. It was almost like when I went to hug him at the end of hearing his story, it was almost like this crazy electric whatever energy. And then I looked down and I saw a wedding ring on his finger. I was like, damn, darn it. But we became friends, and little did I know, he was just about to leave his wife, and it had nothing to do with me. He had been married for 20 years, and the marriage was over a long time, and he was getting out of it. And so anyway, I heard all this through the AA grapevine. I was keeping my ears open. But anyway, he ended up dating somebody for 5 years, and then I ended up being in a couple of relationships. And finally, thanks to Facebook, he saw when I became single, I saw when he became single. And his mom lives in Jacksonville, Florida. He lived in Chicago. So he met his mom for whatever, and then asked if he could drive up to Tallahassee and take me out to lunch. Lunch turned into dinner, and we ended up being in a 1.5 year long relationship. He ended up leaving his life in Chicago for 20 years, and let me tell you something. I don't know of any man who does more for Alcoholics Anonymous than James. And he sponsors he's been sober 34 years, sponsors tons of guys, and he brings a meeting in Tallahassee into the homeless shelter Monday night, the jail Tuesday night, and the prison Saturday night. He really, he raises the bar for anybody. And he ended up popping the question in this romantic castle in Portugal, and we ended up getting married 1.5 years ago. Another miracle. And here's another really crazy, weird story, but when I got out of prison, my therapist took me to a women's retreat, not just like this, but not as big, in St. Simon Island, Georgia. And the first woman speaker that I ever saw is now my mother-in-law. Is that crazy? And I don't know of any woman in Alcoholics Anonymous who does as much as my mother-in-law does. As a matter of fact, some of you probably know who she is, the amazing Polly P. And yeah, how lucky am I that she's my mother-in-law? And and she couldn't be happier because, she is so happy that her son is happy. Both of her sons are happy. But who would have known that those 2 boys that she talks about, how she neglected as, when she was in her alcoholism. I'm hearing about these boys, and I remember crying because I never heard somebody be so honest about what was going on. Who would have thought one of those little boys someday would be my husband? Is that crazy? Anyway, all those kind of things happen to us left and right, don't they? So anyway, my life today is beyond my wildest dreams. I'll tell you something. What I have to do is constantly remind myself that I'm not running the show. That's another simple rule that we all have to live by. I basically, when I know I'm screwing up, I stop, I pause, I ask God for His direction, and the answer comes to me right in my gut. We've entered the world of the Spirit, as they say. We hopefully, after going through the 12 steps, we do experience that joy of living. And we're living in the solution. That's the important thing. We need to just keep living in the solution. And how do we do that? By staying tapped into this amazing program called Alcoholics Anonymous. So, I would love to just close, first of all, by thanking you for listening to me tonight. And I have 2 things. The one thing that I wanted to share was the 12-step prayer, which I've just, I know, another thing, I have to share this. Okay. I actually recently spoke at an AA meeting down in the Keys, and my judge came to the gratitude dinner. How crazy is that? And she cried and gave me a hug, and I thanked her for saving my life. I always forget to share that. Another thing is I'm a breast cancer survivor, so I wanted to say that to all my sisters out there who are breast cancer survivors. And I got through that whole thing by using my 12-step program. But this one is amazing, and it's very recent. I tried, they told me I could never drive again. I ride my bike everywhere. And it's cool. I'm lucky I have a foot, so that I never complain about riding my bike. And but I got hit by a car twice last year, and my mother, by the way, my relationship with my family is amazing right now. My mother is my best friend. I love my mom, and it's this, again, that's all thanks to this program. As I said, my family, my sister, they're all unbelievably grateful and thankful to all of you. But my mom went on this rampage, and she started this whole movement to try and get me a pardon for that first DUI that I had in New Jersey in 1993. So she gathered her forces, and this is about like a year ago. So anyway, on his last day of office, I got a call. I picked up the phone. I'm like, hello, this is Jane. And he's like, hello, Jane. This is Governor Chris Christie from New Jersey. I was like, what? Oh, my God. I was like, oh, my God, oh, my God. And I said, first of all, thank you so much for considering me for the pardon. And he said, Jane, I'm not considering it anymore. You are pardoned. And I was like, oh, my God, what are the chances of that? He only pardoned something like 26 people. And it was the last day he left office. And what he said to me, and I'm saying this because I guess I'm not tooting my own horn, but he said, I've read all your stuff, and I am amazed at the transformation that you made with your life. And you deserve this. And I am a big believer in second chances. And I was just like, thank you. And he was funny and genuine because, no matter what your political affiliation is, he really was genuinely concerned. And he's right now, I think, in charge of the Opiate Commission. So let's hope that he can do something there, And really, if he has the attitude that he shared with me, he will. So we'll all keep our fingers crossed for that. But I just wanted to share that, too, because that just happened a couple of weeks ago. And so again, the amazing things that happen when we stay sober. If you're new, please stick around. Okay, so the 12-step prayer. Dear God, my spiritual awakening continues to unfold. The help I have received, I shall pass on and give to others, both in and out of the fellowship. For this opportunity, I am grateful. I pray most humbly to continue walking day by day on the road of spiritual progress. I pray for the inner strength and wisdom to practice the principles of this way of life in all I do and say. I need you, my friends, and the program every hour of every day. This is a better way to live. It works. It really does. Thank you so much. I wish you all a great remainder of the weekend. Stick around for Sunday morning. And you're all so beautiful. So beautiful. Thank you.